Berkshire region of Massachusetts, they have found a way to strengthen the economy of their local residents. Instead of using regular money, they use money that looks kind of like monopoly money. They call it the Berkshire. If you go to berkshire.org, you'll hear this definition of a Berkshire. It is a local currency issued by Berkshires Incorporated, a non-profit organization working in collaboration with participating local banks, businesses, and non-profits. This is the way it works. If you go to the bank and give them $95, they will give you $100 worth of Berkshires, worth of this monopoly-looking money. It can only be spent in the Berkshire region. So if you go to a restaurant and the bill is $100, you can pay in Berkshires. When the restaurant deposits that money, the bank will credit them with $95. So it's a 5% discount, but it makes sure that you spend your money in the local community. So it results in a discount, but encourages people to spend their money locally. To some degree, that's what's going on in this morning's gospel. You may recall the story we heard a few weeks ago in Mark's gospel, in which the religious authorities are trying to get Jesus to answer the question, is it lawful to pay taxes? A trick question, of course. And Jesus asks for a coin, and someone hands him a denarius, a silver coin that's stamped with the image of the emperor. And you probably remember Jesus' famous response, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and render unto God that which is God's. The denarius was an example of the money used throughout the Roman Empire to encourage trade among members of the Roman Empire. But for the Jewish community, such coins were unacceptable for both religious and practical reasons. The religious problem was the image of the emperor stamped on every coin. Such an image was considered idolatry to the Jews. Devout Jews would never be caught owning such a coin. So actually in that story of rendering unto Caesar, it's rather ironic that when he asked for a coin, one of those religious leaders, Jewish religious leaders questioning him, quickly whips out a denarius with the image of the emperor on it. We're intended to wonder what in the world that religious leader is doing with one of these idolatrous coins in his pocket. In the Jewish community, they used their own coins, which only had value within their community, much like they're doing in the Berkshire region of Massachusetts, much like the Berkshire. This avoided the religious problem of using coins with a man's image stamped on it, but it also solved a practical problem. It encouraged the community to only do business with members of that community. Now, one of the basic coins in this Jewish currency was the lepton, a roughly made copper coin, almost not round, and often the stamp on it, which was always a natural symbol, not depicting an animal or a man, was usually off-center. It was a very, very rough coin. And it was the smallest denomination of coins. It was probably 2 of these lepta, or mites, that the widow dropped into the temple treasury. Jesus responds by claiming that this woman gave the greater gift because she gave her all. Now, when Jesus said this, I don't think he was smiling. He was probably shaking his head and looking rather sad, because he had just said that the religious authorities devour the widow's houses. He doesn't seem to trust the way the temple treasury will be spent. But at the same time, he recognizes that this woman is not giving just to support the temple. She is giving to express her trust in God. Now, that doesn't mean she was not supporting her community. Most likely she was. After all, she gave the lepton, not the Roman coin. So she was using Jewish currency, meaning she supported the local businesses. But her trust was placed in God. She gave her all, making herself completely dependent on God. And we are completely dependent on God. We do put our trust in God. But once we have done that, we become open to seeking God's will in all that we do. And then as a community, we can be the instrument of God's will unfolding in the world today. Now I think this community, this particular household of God we call St. Stephen's, usually does a pretty good job about being instruments of God's will. I've been deeply moved over the last few weeks as I've witnessed the outpouring of support and concern in response to the storms. I've been very impressed how you care for one another. Many of you have been victims of these storms, and the outpouring of support among our members has been amazing. The donations of food and clothing keep coming in, by the way, as well. Please, if you know anybody who needs some clothes, we have mountains of it in the parish hall. Let them know they can come here. I hope that we will continue to even more fully grow into becoming instruments of God's will. To do that, maybe once in a while we need to remind ourselves that this particular community is unique, and we have a particular calling, a specific mission given to us by God. John Maxwell, in his book, Developing the Leader Within You, tells a story about making parachutes during the Second World War. These parachutes were packed by hand in tedious, painstaking, repetitive, boring process. The workers crouched over sewing machines and stitched for 8 hours every day. The endless line of fabric was the same color. Then they folded, packed, and stacked these parachutes. All that was left was for someone to pull the ripcord. So how did they stand this tedious work day after day? They were able to stand it because every morning before they began their work, they gathered as a group. One of the managers reminded them that each parachute would save someone's life. They were then asked to think as they sewed and packed how they would feel if the parachute was strapped to the back of their son, or their father, or their brother. These laborers worked sacrificially, unerringly, uncomplainingly, because someone connected what they were doing to a larger picture, to a larger mission involving the saving of lives. I think it would be helpful if every time we do anything here at St. Stephen's, we remind ourselves that we are also about saving lives by being witnesses to the saving grace offered by God to every person we encounter. Let us follow the example of the widow who gave her all for God. Let us be a community who first puts our complete trust in God, and then may we work together to faithfully be instruments of God's will. Amen.